Hi guys, welcome to my last video of this year, and I thought I would compile a list of books that have touched me, that I have read over this year, that has really affected me and which I have loved. And so I decided that I would not have a predetermined number like 10 or 5. I would go with whatever number of books that I got. So I thought I would get 9 or 13, something very interesting. I got 10. I got 10 books for my list. So this has basically been my year so far. I make plans and it does not work out. But definitely good things have happened. I have read some really good books and that is what I'm going to share with you. Books across genres. So let's come to the first book. And I have listed it according to the way in which I have read it chronologically. And book number 1 is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Sanchez. And this falls in the genre of young adult, contemporary and LGBT gay fiction. So this is the story of 2 Mexican American teenagers in Texas in the 80s, Aristotle and Dante. They are exact opposites. And Dante is very self-assured, he's confident, he loves poetry and art, and he has a very loving household. And Aristotle is just the opposite. He is very diffident, he is silent most of the time, he is not very comfortable with people, and he is also has the burden of having a brother in jail. So these 2 young boys, they form a very strong bond, and the whole book is about how they face challenges and how they support each other and how they have issues with each other but still they come out of it. So it's a very, very beautiful book and very, very well written. So Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Sanchez is a beautifully written book, very, very layered and very interesting to read. Now coming to the second book, The Leopard Hunts in Darkness by Wilbur Smith. One of my all-time favorite authors, okay. I grew up reading Wilbur Smith and I grew up learning about Africa through Wilbur Smith's words. His vivid descriptions of the landscape, of the people, of what happens there, the conflicts, it's beautiful. The Leopard Hunts in Darkness is the last in the Ballantine series, but you can easily read it as a standalone book. This is the story of Craig Mello, a writer who has been born and brought up in Zimbabwe, but during the independence wars, he had to leave home and he is in exile now. He had to leave his beloved Zimbabwe and move out due to racial tensions and other issues happening there. So now he's a renowned writer and he gets an assignment from the World Bank to go back to Zimbabwe and write about conditions there. And he also has to take along a photographer. So this is Craig Mello's journey back to Zimbabwe. It's a thriller and he lands up there and he finds everything is different and he lands up right in the middle of a lot of political games being played between people in power. And there is action, there is mystery, there is a lot of tension happening between all the characters. You get to learn about Zimbabwe and the history of Zimbabwe through this book. Leopard Hunts in Darkness by Wilbur Smith is a brilliant book that I read this year. Book number 3 is completely opposite to what I just talked about. Now this is a very delightful, charming, witty book. It is 10 must-read animal stories by Ruskin Bond, one of my all-time favorite writers. Okay, Ruskin Bond is a darling. This is a very small book. It's just 52 pages. So if you are in a reading slump, this is the perfect book to take up. And even children can read this. It's all about animals. It's all about these really quirky, funny animals and their stories. It's beautifully written. It's vintage Ruskin Bond. The language is so simple yet so beautiful. So 10 must-read animal stories by Ruskin Bond is a must-read. Now we come to book number 4, which is a slightly more serious book written in 1953. It is a classic. It's a classic dystopian novel and it's called Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. It's a classic. So usually when I hear the word classic, my mind shuts down. You know, I cannot read classics for the life of me. Maybe because, I tried reading it very early when I was a child and I just couldn't grasp it. So after that, classics are slightly difficult. but this is a very, very readable classic. It talks about a very dystopian society, and the main protagonist is a fireman, Guy Montag. He's a fireman, and very strangely, Guy and his colleagues go around setting fire. They set fire to books. Now, this is a totalitarian society in which people are encouraged to be mindless. People are encouraged to sit and watch huge screens in which entertainment plays out. They are not encouraged to use their brains and think. So, books are seen as illegal items, and anybody who owns a book is arrested, and that book is burnt along with the house in which they stay. So, this is the basic premise of Fahrenheit 451. It's about suppression, it's about totalitarian regimes, it's about beating down people and not allowing them freedom, basic freedom. So, and it's also about coming out of it, and it's also about survival, people who have the spark within them, who are not completely subjugated by the rules and laws of the place. So, Guy Montag is following his daily routine of going around setting fires, then putting it out, and then searching for books and setting fire to the books, until he gets a neighbor called Clarice. And Clarice and her questions starts making him think about what he's actually doing. So, Fahrenheit 451 is a lovely book. It's a disturbing book. It's a book which is very, very relevant even today. Remember, it was written in 1953, and Fahrenheit 451 is apparently the temperature at which paper burns. Delightful book, very, very strong book, and very readable. The language is really good, and Ray Bradbury just sat down and wrote it. He did not take too long. He just sat and at one go wrote this really beautiful book called Fahrenheit 451, which I loved. So that is book number 4. Let's move on to book number 5. Book number 5 is The Hungry Tide by Amitav Ghosh. And this book is my favorite book from Amitav Ghosh. The story is set in the Sundarbans, and the landscape is so different. There is never-ending water, there is mangrove swamps, and there are all kinds of natural disturbances. There are man-eating tigers, there are typhoons, and anything and everything that can wreak havoc with human life is there. And this story is about people who are passionate about this environment. This is the story of P.R. Roy, an American-born Indian marine biologist who is on the lookout for a rare river dolphin. And she lands up in the Sundarbans, and she wants to go out and explore. She still hasn't gotten a grant for it, but she decides to collect evidence. She decides to collect all the data required and then apply for the grant. And she is helped by Fakir. And Fakir is a boatman, a local boatman, who is very much in love with the place that he is in. And Fakir has a very, very deep understanding of the landscape and of the mammals and of the marine life. And he is very attuned to everything around him. And Pia and Fakir set out on this journey. And it is a beautiful bond that forms between them. And I really loved it, because Fakir is a person who is not educated, but he has a thorough knowledge of the space. He has a thorough knowledge of everything there. Pia is educated, but she is helpless there. She has got her technology. Pia has got her devices, which she is using. And Fakir has his innate knowledge of the land. So these two people are setting out, and they face a lot of challenges. And Fakir has his family, and then there is a translator called Kanoi. Kanoi is also an entrepreneur. So there are these disparate characters, and Kanoi also goes back in time through his uncle's letters. He has landed there. He has landed there to help his aunt out, and he finds his uncle's old diary, and he goes back in time to what his uncle was doing, who was a revolutionary at that time, but later who became a very quiet person. So this is the story of these different individuals who are brought together by this landscape, this really primal landscape, and what happens to them, and their thought process, and the evolution of the bonds between them. And Amitav Ghosh has written this. See, there's a beautiful contrast of the lyrical language and the scientific facts that he puts forth in the book. So beautifully written. And Amitav Ghosh's The Hungry Tide is a truly touching book, and this is the second time I'm reading it, but I really enjoyed it even now. Moving on to book number 6, We Are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Zayyan. I had earlier made a video of this book. I had reviewed this book actually because I loved it so much. And it is a multi-generational book, and it alternates between life in the 60s in Uganda and life in contemporary London. So the life in the 60s in Uganda is through the letters that this person called Hassan writes to his wife. So well written. Those letters are so poignant and evocative, and you fall in love with Hassan and his wife. Then again, there is Samir in contemporary London, and Samir is Hassan's grandson. So this is also a book of exile and dislocation and longing and belonging. So how these people are facing the challenges that face in their lives due to being uprooted. Hassan is uprooted. Samir does not feel a part of where he is. So how is all this reconciled? Hafsa Zayyan has written it very well, very nuanced, very, very beautifully written. So that was book number 6, We Are All Birds of Uganda by Hafsa Zayyan. Now book number 7, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. So this is the second time this book is appearing in my list, because this was published in 2020. And at the end of 2020, I had made a list of books that I regretted not reading that year. And this was one of those books. And I remember that I made a mistake in the name of the author. Instead of Maggie O'Farrell, I said something else. So I had to do a lot of editing. So that is Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell, and I'm so glad that I read it this year. Brilliant. Now this book is set in 16th century in Warwickshire in England, and it tells the story of Agnes. Agnes is the wife of William Shakespeare, and the beauty is the way in which Agnes' spirit has been captured by the author. And William Shakespeare is just one of the characters, okay? He is not the main character, and not much is said about him. It's all about Agnes. And Hamnet is their child who dies when he's 11 years old. So this is basically about how Agnes faces up to it, and how she feels abandoned by her husband. Now William Shakespeare takes off for London, and in order to further his writing career. Now that is a decision that both of them had made together, but later Agnes realizes that William is not coming back and helping her as they had originally planned. And Agnes is a wild woman. Agnes does not behave as per the conventions of society, because there's so much within her and there's so much that she wants to do. She's another person who is completely in tune with nature. She's a healer. There are a lot of women who come to her for healing and for cures. And this book is totally Agnes. And Agnes is such a wonderful character. It's such a layered character, and you will love reading about her. So Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell is a beautiful book that I hope that you get to read. Let's move on to book number 8. The Whisper Man by Alex North. This is hands down one of the most chilling books that I have read. And I was so invested in it that I think I finished it in 2 days. And both those days, before sleeping, I looked under the bed because I was so petrified. This book is a murder mystery, a thriller, horror, everything. And it tells the story of Tom and Jake. His son is Jake. So Tom Kennedy is a writer. So Tom Kennedy's wife has died, and he wants a fresh start for himself and his son Jake. And he moves to this town called Featherbank. Jake is a small boy, okay, and Tom finds that it was his wife who used to connect with Jake, and Tom has lost that connection. He has to rebuild it again. So Tom and Jake land up in Featherbank. Featherbank is a town which has a very dark history. There was a lot of murders that happened there, murders of little children, and the person who was responsible for it has been captured. Frank Carter. He has been captured and he is in jail. So what used to happen was that these children, before they were kidnapped, they used to hear whispers outside their windows. Oh my God, just thinking about it, it's like so disturbing. So these children hear whispers outside their windows. and the targets usually are children who are very vulnerable because there is some disturbance at home and they feel alienated from home. There's nobody who's actually checking up on them all the time, and these are the kind of children that are targeted by the Whisper Man. He's been nicknamed the Whisper Man. So the Whisper Man has been captured, case closed, cases have been closed, and things have moved on. Until Tom and Jake come there, they land up, and one day Jake starts hearing whispers outside his window. It was so scary. So is Frank Carter actually the Whisper Man, or does he have an accomplice? So what is all this? God, it has been written so well. The narrative is fast paced. I mean, you don't feel a lag anywhere, and it's chilling, and there are so many twists happening. So Whisper Man by Alex North is a guaranteed entertainer. It will disturb you. So if you want a horror book, go and read this, okay? Whisper Man by Alex North. Now let's move on to book 9. So book number 9 is a Malayalam book that I read this year. It's called Nellimaram, Pulana by Rajani Palamparambil. And it is Rajani's own story. It's a very small book. It is her experiences as a Dalit woman in Kerala. So she writes about her life as a child, the conditions that she lived in, the situations that she faced in school, in college, the discrimination that she faced. All these things are written in a very, very spare language. She does not go all flowery, or she does not go all descriptive, but the language is so raw, and what is written is so disturbing. So there's this beautiful contrast there, and really hits you, and you start thinking about it. So in a progressive state like Kerala, where we feel that we have made great strides in all these areas, but there is still a lot left to be done. There is still a lot that we need to be aware of. So Rajani Palamparambil's Nellimaram Pulana is a very, very hard book to read, and it's not very difficult, but it is very disturbing. So if you get time, and all Malayalis out there, if you get time, do read this, Nellimaram Pulana by Rajani Palamparambil. And now to the last book of this list, and one of the most beautiful books in this list. It is Rebirth by Jahnavi Barua. Jahnavi Barua is a favorite author of mine, because I had read a short story collection of hers called Next Door. So beautifully written. She writes basically about life in Assam, and Rebirth, her book, had been shortlisted for the Man Asian Literary Prize. And rightly so, I feel it should have won it, yeah. And Jahnavi writes about this young woman called Kaberi from Assam, and she comes to Bangalore when she marries Ranjit, and how she copes with life with a person who is so distinctly different from what she's used to, from the kind of people she's used to, from a social setup that is very different from what she's used to, how she navigates all that, and how she starts finding herself, how she realizes that she's not as weak as she thought she was. She discovers the inner strength within her, and the prose is lyrical, the prose is beautiful. It is an experience reading Rebirth by Jahnavi Barua. It is an experience reading about the life of Kaberi, and Kaberi is a beautiful person. You will fall in love with her by the time you finish reading this book. I was rooting for her, and I was hoping that I would get to meet somebody like that. So these are the 10 books that I read and loved this year, and I hope that you get to read at least some of these, and I hope at least some of these have piqued your interest. So I hope that you guys get to read more, because you have to read more. It's not just a question of sitting with a book, but it's a question of discovering new worlds and finding about a lot of things that we had no idea about. And we should be aware of so many different things that are happening around us. And books are the best way of doing that, I feel. So all of you guys have a great 2022. Let's hope that all of us do good things in 2022. 2021 has tried its best to beat us down to our knees, but somehow we have all crawled up to here, bruised, battered, but still somehow staying alive, hanging on to our sanity, and trying to do things that we really want to do in life. Happy New Year to you guys. Have an awesome year ahead. Bye-bye.